I bet you can hear me now. Awesome. Okay, cool. So everything's working. Before we dig in, obviously we are going to be doing a preview of my league list for the upcoming 40K league. Got a little bit different setup going on. We're going to see if Restream is going to work. I bet it doesn't. There's nothing showing up on Restream for either of them. Man, I have got to get that figured out. That is the poopy duty. So one of these days, you guys are all going to be sitting here with me while I troubleshoot this. I'm not going to do it right now. I'll just try to relay what's going on in chat for everybody. Again, apologize. It's been an ongoing issue. I did actually finally set aside time for it. There's a copy of the link, actually, to the Google Doc in the video description if you're on YouTube. I don't know if it's on... here we go. So we're going to put a copy of this. This is the list. Oh, get out of here, you cursed AI. This is the list. We'll put a copy in each chat. Bam. So that's just a Google link. Will take you to my list. If you're interested in reading through it, I will pin it on Twitch. Can I pin it on the YouTube? Sure I can. Pin message. Sure can. So they're both pinned. And then again, before we dig in, I'd like to give a big shout out to Military Gaming Command. I'm going to do this at the beginning now. And really, I'm not affiliated. Again, they don't pay me to advertise for them. It's militarygamingcommand.org. They are a nonprofit that I've done some work with in the past. I really enjoy what they do. I think it's very important what they do, and it's very community driven and community based. And honestly, if we're being sincere, had I tapped into this and it been around probably when I first got out of active duty and transitioned to guard and transitioned into being a civilian, I'm not saying I wouldn't have made all of the mistakes I made, because I made plenty of them, but it definitely would have gone a long way to helping me out and keeping me kind of on the straight and narrow. It would have really, I would have benefited from something like that, to know that there are other people who just had the same struggles. Because one of the things that I struggled with when I got out of active duty is that I didn't really have any local active duty veterans. And so, like, there was this sense of isolation that really kind of, I made bad choices because of it, you know, and ultimately they were my choices. I made them. I take responsibility for them. But I feel like had I known or been able to access a support network and a support system like what they've set up through gaming and community, I probably could have at least avoided some of the bad choices that I made. So I always like to shout them out because they do such great work, and I just really love what they do, and it means a lot to me being a veteran. So again, check them out, donate, be cool if you did. I don't expect it, but I would appreciate it. It doesn't benefit me in any way. I do have the spring shop. I have put a couple new Blood Bowl shirts on. Tuds for the Tuds God should be up here soon, and my Tuds for the Tuds God shirt should be coming in pretty soon here. I ordered some before we were supposed to go to Tampa, and they still haven't gotten here, so I need to check on that. But that's not what we're here for. We're not here to hear me talk about everything that isn't 40K or Drukhari. We're here to hear me talk about 40K and Drukhari. And for those that noticed on the thumbnail, the Sad Cab light's back, bringing him out of retirement. This doesn't mean I'm going to be playing a ton of 40K, but what it does mean is I am playing it a bit more. I'm going to be straightforward with everybody. I'm still not thoroughly enjoying 10th edition. And honestly, a lot of it stems from, I still hate Overwatch. You know, I absolutely despise that mechanic. I don't enjoy knowing that it exists. Like, it creates so many feel bad situations, in my opinion, that it is the primary reason that I've just stepped away from 40K. And then as I've explored other games, I've realized that the structure of 40K is what makes Overwatch feel so bad. Because it's an I go, you go game, it simply is why it creates so many feel bads for me, because it's like, dude, I can't even move on my own turn. So So I'm dipping my toe back in. I am getting more games in. I am playing a bit more. And I actually did just play in a 4-round league with, I believe it was 14 players. It just went until there was one undefeated. I was the lone undefeated. I think I did a league recap on that. I'll have to look. If I did, I'll put a link in the comments after I post the video. And then for those that are interested, and I'm going to get through all these announcements. I'm sorry that there's a lot of talking. Next week is a firefight tournament. That is Mantic Games. If you know them, it's probably for Halo Flashpoint or for Kings of War. Well, they have a 40k analog called Firefight. I'll be doing a 6-player tournament of that. We'll do a preview live stream of my list for that, and then we'll also do a recap of that. So I did win the last league. I went 4-0 with 60 Kabalites. And when I was getting ready for this league, and it'll probably be 4 rounds, because again, it'll go until there's only one undefeated, and we have more players this time. We actually are back up to 16. The league numbers are back up. So when I made my list this time, I kind of approached it with, well, I effectively did Oops All Kabalites last time. Let me see if I can do Oops All Witches. Well, I don't have the witches' bodies. I think I had 40 of the 60 that I would have wanted. And I was like, okay, well, can I do Oops All Racks? And again, I was like 40 of 60. Like, I was just short of what I would need to run a really, like, kind of meme list. So what I decided to do was I decided to go, well, if we ran all Kabalites last time, let's run no Kabalites this time, and that'll kind of be like my theme, because that's how I've started to kind of approach any kind of 40k game. Is like, all right, what kind of weird thing can I do? And that's kind of always been my mantra for those that have been watching for a while. Is like, how can I meme it up? What can I do that's gonna make this fun and silly for me? So I was like, all right, well, let's just not run any Kabalites. And instead of running the new detachment, the Sky Splinter Assault, let's kick it old school and let's go back to the Space Raid. So that's what I'm doing. And it's going to be funny. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it's going to be funny. So I'm going to pull my list up on my phone, and I apologize. But it's... As I go through things, I'll pull them up. I've got the website that shall not be named on the screen here. And we'll go through them here as I go through units on the phone. And again, I apologize for all like the rash and everything. I know I look like, a 10-pound bag of dicks right now. And a lot of that just stems from I just recovered from shingles. All this is like the holdovers from the shingles. Drukhari OP, need the nerf. Well, Dan, good to have you on chat. I disagree. They're not a good army. They can score, but they're not a good army. And I think with the points adjustments and the buffs that some of the other armies got, coupled with the points adjustments and the nerfs that Drukhari got, I'm curious to see how everything shakes out. They weren't oppressive, and they didn't win a lot of events. So that's where the whole win percentage thing gets a little weird, because they might have been riding a pretty high win rate for the last, 3 months? But how many events did they win? And that's where it gets kind of funny, is like, they weren't winning a ton of events. It's not like they were sweeping all these GTs. What it means is that most of the Drukhari players were out there probably going like 2-1 or 3-2 at a GT, for example. They might go 3-2, they might go 4-1. Maybe a couple of them go 5-0 at a GT that has multiple undefeated players, but they're not like winning a ton of things, because while they can score points, they don't stay on the table. But without further ado, let's dig into the list. Maybe, if I can figure out how this works. There we go. And of course, it's a space raid. You can't play a space raid without the world's most handsome Archon. And so I brought one. He has literally no enhancements. he is going to be with 10 incubi instead of Kabalites. And again, that was really just because I didn't want to bring any Kabalites, but I did like starting with another pain token. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to play without Kabalites. I wanted to bring Big Dick Drazar, but he also got a points increase, which seems a little weird. Again, I've not looked. I don't keep up with what people do competitively, but looking at Drazar, I can't imagine Drazar is being spammed in competitive lists when you can still get the +1 to wound from the Archon. So it just seems kind of weird that Drazar got hit with this, even though homie literally hasn't changed. And it's just like, this feels a little weird. But had he not got the 10 points, I'd have brought Drazar as opposed to the Archon. But with with them both getting the points hike, I just figured the Archon gives me an extra pain token at the start of the game because of Space Raid. And reroll wounds is still pretty good, It's pretty good. And of course, he's got his stuff. Like we don't have to dig into his loadout. I also brought Edward Scissorhands, aka Homunculus, aka Burt Bacharach. And he does have the Art of Pain, which is, I believe, the one where you get a command, a pain token in your command phase as long as he's on the battlefield. To me, that's an auto take enhancement for a Homunculus. Because of the way I play the Homunculus, is I'm just going to slap them in with 5 racks. They're going to sit on my backfield objective. They're going to hold it. They're going to screen. And then they're going to just like generate a pain token every turn. And then he also gives me a pain token because he's in my list and it's Space Raid. And then because I love her, we're bringing Lilith. For those that don't know, let's look at Lilith. She is the bee's knees. If you have infantry, she will just blend it. I think the worst I've ever seen her perform is I whiffed. I rolled poorly into a 5-man of whatever those things are. Custodes, the Guardians, I think it is. And I rolled really poorly. Like I had popped her once per game, rolled really poorly, and still killed 2.5 with just her. So it was just like, she's just too good into any kind of infantry. Now, she's base AP2, goes to AP3 while she's attached, and then AP4 while she's empowered. So, again, like, 2-up save with no invuln, it's just going to be, 6-ups. 3-up save with no invuln, this damage going straight through. And it's really funny, like, I've had her put plenty of damage on knights before because they don't have invulns in melee, and I'm just like, hey, I'm just going to roll a bucket of dice, and we're going to let Jesus take the wheel. So again, she's too good not to bring, in my opinion, and for how I play. And obviously, she's got her 10 witches. You don't need to see my college stuff. And so I've got her with 10 witches. I've got the succubus with 10 witches. And then she does have Blade Dancer. Does that show up here? Probably not. So let's do this. Let's copy, paste. Or Blood Dancer, I guess, is actually what it's called. There we go. That's the tented one. I'm a goose. Blood Dancer. So it improves the attack and armor pen of her melee weapons by 1. And then while she's empowered, she gets an additional 1. So she gets 2 for both of them instead. And again, she's already base AP2, I think it is. Yep. Goes to AP3 when she's empowered. Blood Dancer makes her AP4. And then AP5 if she's empowered with Blood Dancer. So again, it's more for the memes. Although it is 8 attacks with sustained hits while she's attached. So it's one of those where the succubus is still really good. Again, the downside is that it's anti-infantry. And she's still only strength 3. Like, that still feels bad. I'd like to see witches go to strength 4. I think that goes a long way for all of them being a bit more playable. And maybe, unfortunately, I have to say it like this because they're just not going to change at this point. Hopefully, when the Codex comes out, they get something that's like, hey, if you're playing witches, here's how they can just not suck all the time. And I'm going to continue crying about witches. It's what I'm going to do. Sorry if you don't want to hear it. We do have 3 units of 5 racks. And really, again, this was cheap bodies, 60 points. They don't need a transport. They have a sniper rifle, which is funny. I think I rarely does it seem to do anything, but it is strength 6, neg 2. So it's one of those, like, if you can get a couple of them targeting a single unit, there's a good chance, like, you'll at least get something through. And then when they die, they give me a pain token, so that's neat. The main thing is that with the space raid, if I wanted to, I can -1 to wound them. And especially with the homunculus unit, like, arguably I probably should have put 10 racks in there so I could have the 4 up, feel no pain, -1 to wound. But that's not where the -1 to wound really needs to go. And, so it's just one of those, like, I've got all their fixins. There's nothing really special about racks. I'd argue that they're actually overpointed at 60 points. They are more, they might be the same now. Let me look. I'm going to say, I think they're more than Kabalites. Oh, you know what? It might not be up to date in here anyway. So let's do this. Nope, they are more than Kabalites. So Kabalites are 110 points for 10 of them, and racks are 60 points for 5. So that's, technically it's more. It's a point per model more, and I can't see it. I don't understand it. I don't know if it's because you can take them in 5-man units, so that's how it's justified as like, well, for 60 points you can get 5 bodies. Because in most situations I would just rather have Kabalites. Like, they're just better. They get the sticky objectives. I mean, we all know this. I don't need to say it. Everybody knows. So that's racks. Like I said, I got 20 witches. I do have 2 raiders with dark lances, and that's really for the witches or maybe the archon. Like, it's going to be game dependent. Maybe I throw them in a transport, or maybe I put them in reserves or on the table. Like, I'm going to have to really take a look at what my opponent has before I make that decision. And I can always, let me see, Raiders. I don't remember if they do it. I know the Venoms do. Yep, I can always deep strike one of the Raiders if I wanted to. Like, I have that option. That's what I wanted to make sure. I don't know that I want to. It doesn't seem like it'd be very good considering it's going to have bodies in it. Like melee bodies, not shooting bodies. Although if I really felt the need, I could just put all of the, like, 10 racks in it. Just so I could have some kind of shooting coming out of it. Although I do get all my splinter pistols. Let's go. But yeah, so it's one of those, like, that's what the Raiders are for, though, is they're going to play Kiki's delivery surface for something. I just haven't decided what yet. And it'll really be opponent dependent. My first round, I'm playing, I assume I'm playing against Votan, the guy that jumped into the league, that brought me into the league, because I was only going to play if there were odd numbers. He jumped in last minute, and he's making his list. He's going to get it to me today, but I'm 99% sure it'll be Votan. And, it's one of those, like, I'll make that decision when I see what he puts on the table, like what goes in deep strike, what comes out. Good chance I have some Talos. We'll get into that in a minute. Grotesques. I do have 6 Grotesques. Again, like, the big thing for this league was, let's put things on the table that, like, I haven't put on the table in a while. I haven't put Grotesques on the table almost at all this edition. I still think they're too many points for what you get out of them. I do. I just think they're bad. Like, they don't do anything special. They're T5? T5, 4 wounds, 6 up invuln. No base armor save, a 6-up base armor save. So, like, if you don't have AP and I have cover, I can get a 5-up. Ooh, boy. They do move 7 inches, which is kind of cool. They have a 5-up feel no pain. This is probably one of the targets for the -1 to wound strat, if we're being honest. The fact that they take up 3 slots in a transport is why I just ran a unit of 6. Because I did consider running a couple units of 3 and maybe throwing them in a raider, but I was just like, man, that's such a waste. Like, that doesn't do me any good. And they don't get any benefit from the raider in this detachment. So it's just like, there's no lance for them. It just feels bad. But they've got the liquefier, they've got their monstrous weapons, which are not terrible melee. Again, the issue isn't that their melee is terrible, it's that it doesn't do anything except the infantry. You know, you got enough dice there that you could probably chip some wounds in. And the empowerment token giving them -2 probably makes them a bit better. I haven't played them at all since like early in the edition. So this is going to be kind of a re-exploration for me of how I feel about them. I think there's probably some lists in which they feel okay. And it just depends on what you expect out of them. We'll see. I think if you keep expectations low and then plan on them to do one specific thing and that's it. They are not going to be the world beaters that they were in 9th, and I don't expect that. But they don't feel durable and they don't feel killy. And they just kind of feel like they tried to be both and got halfway to each objective, you know? And I still think their ability sucks. On a 4-up, they get to fight if they haven't already fought, you know? Like, it's just kind of poop. It is what it is. I'd still like to see you be able to put a homunculus in there with them. That to me is like, that makes them really, really solid. Or just make them take up 2 slots in a transport instead of 1. Because that still chaps my caboose. So I've got 6 racks. I've got some Hellions. I love Hellions as far as models go. Again, I don't think I've played them since the new detachment came out. Even when I've played the Space Raid, I haven't really played Hellions. And a lot of that just is because they suffer from the same issues that I think most of the army suffers from. And what I mean by that, or not most of the army, most of the witch cult stuff suffers from. And what I mean by that is like, bro, they're pretty good at killing like T3 and T4 infantry, and that's about the extent of it. Again, this is another unit that could benefit from a bonus strength, but I've got a brick of 10, and honestly, I don't expect a ton out of them. They move 14 inches. A brick of 10 was fairly cheap at 150 points. So 150 points gives me a 5-up save and a 6-up invuln for, 20 wounds at T4 with a 14-inch move. They are sustained hits in melee, and then they are anti-infantry 3, and then assault and twin linked in shooting. So again, like, I can clear chaff with them. Like, they're going to be good depending on the matchup. If I end up hitting like a horde of something, they're going to be worth their weight in gold. You know, obviously that didn't come out the way I thought it would. And then, but if I hit something like round 1 into Votan, I don't know how they're going to do. It just depends on what his list is. Like, if he's got a lot of bodies, the Hellions are going to perform. If he just brings a lot of tanks, they're just going to be there to score. You know, I think they lost Deep Strike. Looks like they did. Yep. I just wanted to make sure. But yeah, they lost Deep Strike. Yeah, they still have old points on here. Good. That's why I wanted to go back to the app. And this is like really old. This hasn't been updated in a while. They can't fall back and shoot and charge. Actually, yeah, shoot and charge. I was just making sure that said shoot. So they can fall back, shoot, and charge. But the problem I run into with that is that if they get into combat and they don't kill whatever it is they've charged, they usually don't live long enough for me to take advantage of that. All they have is hit and run. That's right. I wish, man. Like I said, like if they charge something, 9 times out of 10, if it doesn't die, I'm picking up enough of them that them being able to fall back, shoot, and charge is largely irrelevant. It's just one of those, like, can't roll hot roll lots. But I do hope that this is another one of those units that if I empower them and they go to -2, it just makes them feel a little better. Because strength 4 kind of sucks. This is a unit that probably should be strength 5. But at least at strength 4 -2, it feels less bad. Because, like, 50-50 to kill a Space Marine for Hellions is kind of rough. When Hellions are 15 points a model. And they're not going to shoot any Space Marines off the table. Like, I still have to get there. But we'll see. I'm excited to get them back on the table. I do have 10 incubi. I don't need to bring them up. Everybody knows what they do. The empower bonus that they get for AP has been insanely valuable. Going to -3 has been a godsend. Absolutely. I love it. And then I've got my mandatory unit of Mandreezes, or Mandrakes, just the 5-man that I plan on having get killed within the first turn of the game, first 2 turns of the game. And again, it's just because of how I play them. I literally use them as a speed bump, especially if my opponent has a lot of, like, scout moves or anything like that. Like, I'm not out here like, ooh, I've got to save my Mandrakes for scoring. I'm just like, bro, you got some scout moves? I'm just going to slam them in your face, and then you're not going to scout move. Oh, you've got some, forward deploys? Well, I'm just going to spread them out as much as I can and just do my best to keep you from being able to forward deploy. Like, they are not a scoring unit for me. They're a scoring prevention unit for me. I use them to prevent my opponent from being able to be hypermobile early in the game. Sometimes I get lucky and I'm able to score with them. Before the action change, we did a league, and I got first turn, and I drew behind enemy lines and deploy teleport homers. And I was able to... Give me a second, buddy. Good to see you again, man. Also, by the way, give me a second. I'll jump back to Hellions in a second. You just missed my talk on them. But it was really funny because I got that. I was able to advance into my opponent's deployment zone, deploy teleport homers, get 1 unit for behind enemy lines, and then, like, he had overwatched me and killed all but 1 of the Hellions. I got all of that stuff, all those points, and then I was able to just, like, have 1 model left in the unit, and that 1 model, because of how he had deployed, was able to just, like, bottleneck his whole army for a turn. So it's one of those, like, sometimes I get some value out of them. No, you're good, man. You're good. Sometimes I get some value out of them. But usually, because of how I play Mandrakes, they're dead within the first 2 turns. Welcome to Proxy Hammer. If you have not seen his channel, check it out. Feel free to put a link in the chat there, buddy. He does a lot of Eldari content. And, to get back to your question... I haven't put them on the table yet. I've been looking at them. I think they're still going to just feel kind of bad. But they're a lot cheaper at 15 points a model than they were at 17 to 20 points a model that they were before all of their constant points adjustments. I am curious to see how they perform with the extra AP that they are going to get from being empowered. Because... to me, and I said this when those changes first came out, and then they gave you the Sky Splinter Assault, right? When Sky Splinter Assault came out, generally my opinion was my data sheets still suck. They just give me a detachment that makes them suck less, right? And that the extra AP from becoming empowered was more beneficial than the detachment. And so far, I'd have to say that's true because there's only a handful of units that really benefit from the Sky Splinter Assault detachment. Don't get me wrong, Sky Splinter Assault's a lot of fun. It gives the army a theme, it gives it a feel, it gives it an identity, and all these things are benefits, but at the end of the day, it really only benefits Cabalites, Witches, Incubi, right? It doesn't benefit Racks for the most part because they just have anti-infantry attacks. But being empowered does give Racks AP, which they didn't. So it's one of those, like, I think the empowering is more beneficial. The empowering AP is more beneficial than the Sky Splinter Assault across the board. Racks, or Hellions, I think, are a unit that I'm eager to get on the table and test them out. I played one game. Heresy? Maybe. Why is it heresy? I got a lot of hot takes, man. I have a lot of unpopular opinions. So, but what I will say is that I think that is more beneficial than the detachment because it benefits almost everything in your army. The detachment really only benefits transports and battle line units, and honestly, it doesn't really benefit racks. Whereas the extra AP benefits pretty much anything you would want to empower. You empower Cabalites in melee, and now they're AP 1 with 2 attacks each hitting on 3s re-rolling. That's actually like not a terrible profile, and it's not that far off from Witches without being empowered. So it's just one of those, like, I just find that buff alone was better. Like, Incubi going to AP 3 while they're empowered was more meaningful to me than getting +1 to wound coming out of a transport. Don't get me wrong, +1 to wound is very good. And couple that with the Archon's rerolls, and it's really, really good. But now I can make it AP 3. And to me, that's just a better interaction. So that's kind of what I see. I totally agree. Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's one of those where I get people who tell me, well, I don't see what you're complaining about. Your army's doing well competitively. And you missed that because you weren't here for the beginning. But the issue is that they don't win a ton of events, right? I don't keep up with it as much as I used to because I've been exploring other games. But I do know they haven't won a ton of events. So that tells me that really a lot of players are going like 3-2 or maybe 4-1. And so it's not really indicative of how good the army is. It's really showing me that we can score points until we hit a certain level or a certain like tier of army. So it's just kind of weird. Couple that with the fact that, you know, you don't have a ton of players going out there buying up Drukhari armies to go play at tournaments. That's generally the people who play Drukhari are playing Drukhari, and we've just played Drukhari and we know how it works, and we can go and we can win games, you know, and that's what I'm seeing. I'd still really like to see just a rework of a few of the data sheets. Like, I'd like to see a rework of the grotesques. I'd like to see a rework of the witches. Like, I don't think it... I think... And again, this has been my opinion pretty much the whole edition. Drukhari feels like an army that's just, like, almost there. They don't need a ton to make them feel fun and good. They're almost there. You know, it's kind of weird. But after the Mandrakes, I've got Reavers. Drukhari are extremely hard to buy nowadays, which is interesting. Because again, there's not a ton of players out there playing them. Like, I have looked into that just to kind of make sure I'm not crazy, and they're not. You know, I did notice that they are getting. I've noticed that there are more new players, at least locally, that are looking into them. And I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but I do know at least part of that is attributed to me. This being basically the only army I've played for 5 years. So when I play and then people see how I play and people see how well I do, they're like, well, that must be a good army. And I'm just like, no, man, it's not. I've just only played this army for like 5 years. Like, I've dabbled with some other stuff. I've put my orcs on the table occasionally, but ultimately since like maybe 4 years, like mid-9th, this is almost exclusively what I've played. And so, like, I just know how to use it. They do. And again, like, I could go on for days about my issues with the way codexes are released and the way this is all structured. But, I mean, I'd just be preaching to the choir because I know this is an interaction that a lot of players don't enjoy. So that's my take on Hellions, though, is that I don't think they're going to be good. Yeah. I don't think they're going to be good. I think they're going to be very matchup specific. I think if I hit something that's very infantry heavy, I'm going to have a field day. And with running space raids so I can advance and charge with them, that's going to help out a lot. So I think that into, like, if I hit a bug heavy, like little bug heavy horde kind of list, they'll feel good. If I hit an infantry body heavy list that isn't like Custos or Terminators, they're going to feel good. If I hit anything that's T6 and above, like army wide, probably going to feel like, man, I shouldn't have even brought these, and that's just the way it is. But with 14-inch movement, and fly doesn't really matter, but with 14-inch movement, I feel like I can at least get some sort of utility out of them. So if I hit a matchup where I'm like, oh my gosh, these are going to be useless, I can at least use their mobility to score. So now that we've talked about Mandrakes, I do have 6 Reavers. With the nerfs, I'm unironically thinking Space Raid is better overall. Yeah, it's weird. Before I dig into Reavers, I'm going to address that. So the nerf kind of chapped my ass a little bit, and the reason is because the Archon got a points hike, which I kind of figured, right? Because a lot of competitive lists were just like, oh, I'm going to bring all the Archons I can. There was a rules clarification that came out too that said your Archon has to be your Warlord to have the aura. Now, I know that was kind of divisive. There were people who were like, well, rules as written, it says you replace it with this. I've talked about rules as written versus rules as intended before. And you can't literally do everything rules as written. You can't. And I can list all kinds of interactions in this game where you've had to go back and look at rules as intended instead of rules as written. So it's one of those, as a Drukhari player, I know that the intent was for the Warlord to be the only one to have the Vect ability. So when people were like, oh, triple Archons is brutal, and it's like, well, that's not how that should work. I understand that rules as written, that's how it works, but that's not how it was intended to work, and that's not how it should work. And I know TOs were ruling that differently based off of their interpretation of the rule. So where I'm going with this is that you could argue that the Archon got a nerf when they did that rules clarification, but then they also gave him a 10 points increase. And I just don't know that both were justified. I only ever run one because I don't see the need for 2 or 3. I don't see the need for 20 or 30 incubi. That's too many points invested into something killing in an army that doesn't really kill well. So you're wasting all your points to bring all these incubi when for those amount of points you could just bring a shitload more Kabalites and have units or racks and have units all over the place. You could even bring witches with venoms just to have scoring units. It's not the sexy take, but if you are playing to win and score points, that's the intelligent take. So I think you could justify giving no points increase to the Archon. And like I said before, I don't understand why there was a points increase to Drazar. You can only take one Drazar. That just seems really weird. So I don't know. In kind of reference to what you said, I don't know. Sky Splinter Assault makes witches playable, and witches are still really cheap, so I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing competitively witch spam so that you can break them up in venoms and just have a lot of footprints and scoring units. And witch melee, while it does suck, it's not so bad that I wouldn't be willing to torpedo them into something. I might torpedo them into a vehicle because I know your vehicle's not going to kill them all, and then just like make you either have to be engaged and get a -1 to hit, or like stop your movement, stuff like that. So it wouldn't surprise me to see, you know, Sky Splinter Assault kind of leaning more towards witches just because of cheap bodies and just being able to move, block, and just be a piece of shit that way. I've barely played with Reavers. A lot of it is because, again, I look at their melee and it's just very underwhelming. Their shooting is kind of underwhelming. They're fast and they can do things, right? Like if you fly over a unit, you get to roll dice and do mortals, which is fine. And then like you can give one model the lance ability, which is kind of rough. Like, god dang, man. Just give the whole unit lance. Like, why is that even a thing? And then the blade veins are strength 4, no AP. So here we see witches with strength 4, but then they're like, strength 4? Too good. No AP. Eat a bag. Like, done. You either get AP or you get strength 4. You don't get to have both. And that just kind of felt bad, you know? Strike and fade, and then also they could advance and charge. Yep, in the space raid. You know, so they do have a lot of mobility potential there. The issue with strike and fade is that at 2 command points and no real way to generate command points. Again, like, I just find that my first turn or two is a lot of just like, I'm going to score 1 secondary and get when I've amassed enough command points that I actually get to interact with the fucking game. I can just like go ham and like spend command points and actually use my army the way it's supposed to be used. So, but they do bring 2 heat lances, which to me is an auto take. For what they do, heat lances are awesome. You know, heat lances are assault. They're melt to 3. They're 14-inch or strength 14, neg 4 d6 with a was it 18-inch range? Yeah. That's it, man. Is just the, you know, and that's how I just play the game now. And I found that I still play it that way when I've dabbled with other armies because it's so ingrained. I'm just like, oh, I'll just score 1, plan to get a command point, and then I'm like, oh wait, I don't have to do that. I actually can play the game. You know, so I do like having 2 more heat lances on the table. Those are pretty spicy. Lance, fine. I give the sergeant the agonizer because there's no reason not to. Yes, it's only strength 3, but it's baked in AP 1 and it's anti-infantry 3 up. So again, if I tag infantry with it and I empower them, it's neg 2 with anti-infantry 3 up. So not terrible. The blade veins, again, like, they're fine. It'd just be cooler if they were like strength 5 no AP or strength 4 neg 1. The melee in this army is still just like laughably bad, you know. And then I have my favorite, and I haven't played these basically since I've started playing the Sky Splinter Assault. And that's Talos, and they still look good. They look so funny still, because they've barely been touched. I don't know that they've been touched at all, and so like they still just look good. And in the real space raid, being able to give T7 7 wounds, 3 up save, 5 up feel no pain, access to -1 to wound. Yeah, absolutely, man. I still think these, and I took 6 of them for the league. I was just like, hey, I don't usually spam, but we're bringing 6 Talos because why not? I've got points. I've got 2 units of 2 with the Haywire blasters because, you know, if you've got vehicles, I'm just going to make sure you don't interact with the game. Like, that's what really kind of pushed me towards Haywire to begin with, was I was just getting really tired of just like, oh, here's my vehicles and they have invulns, and I was just like, cool. You can just pick them up then. I'm just done dealing with this. So I'll have 2 with Haywire, or 4 total with Haywire, I should say. So they're going to have Haywire, they'll have the Liquefier, and then they'll have the Gauntlets. The Gauntlets, man, I'm so mixed on them, especially now that there's bonus AP. I would argue that the Scalpel with the bonus AP is better at this point because they hit on 3s with the same amount of attacks. And they go to -2 for 2 damage. But, you know, I'm a creature of habit, so I'm just going to stick with the gauntlets. Yeah, they hit on 4s, but they do go to -3 for 3 damage, you know? So it's one of those, like, that's a unit that needs to be like strength 10. Like that gauntlet, every attack, in my opinion, on their profile needs to go up at least 1 strength, maybe 2. If the gauntlets are going to hit on 4, they should be 10. I don't care what anybody says. Like, that's just how it is. Give them 4 attacks, make them hit on 3s, make them strength 10. Give them 1 less attack. Better into infantry with feel no pain and 2 wounds. Yes, also true. You know, the gauntlet to me is just a more versatile weapon. The -3 pushes basically anything they hit and wound into an invuln if it has it. The 3 damage mitigates feel no pains on 2 wound models a lot better. And damage reduction on 2 wound models a lot better. If any of them have it, I don't know. And then it also, like, yes, if you charge a Land Raider with it, you're wounding it on 5s, right? But that becomes a 5-up for 3 damage instead of a 4-up for 2 damage. Exactly, and that's exactly where I just went into that. Yep. You know, it's just more versatile of a weapon because there's nothing it feels really inherently bad into, whereas macro scalpels are going to feel bad into certain things. The chain flails, I would almost consider, because I think, if I remember right, you could drop the liquefier for the chain flail. No. You have to get rid of a macro scalpel, and then you either take the chain flail or the gauntlet. That's right. So, yeah, the chain flails aren't terrible, but the fact that you have to choose between chain flail or gauntlet just means I'm going to take gauntlet every time. I don't run into enough hordes that I am like, man, I wish I had chain flails. Now, if I could take gauntlet chain flail, even if I could only use one of them, right, like you had to pick, I would do that over the liquefier all day long, just because it's like, man, 8 attacks. If I empower them, they're at -1. If they kill a unit, they're always empowered. So it's just like, that seems like a no-brainer. Like, yeah, I would do that. But for the most part, the gauntlets are just more versatile. There's not, at 5 attacks each, there's nothing they're going to feel really bad into. And then I do have one unit that has Heat Lances, and really that was mostly just because I wanted to try them out again. I don't know that Heat Lances are going to feel really good because of the fact that they hit on 4s, and it's 1 shot per Talos, so it's 2 shots hitting on 4s. If I empower them, obviously I reroll, but I figured I'd give them a whirl. You know, worst case scenario is I put them on the table, they don't really do much, and then I charge, and then I feel better about myself. I'm looking at the Heat Lances more as a bit of a deterrent. Like, people are going to look at the Heat Lance profile and be like, ooh, that looks nasty, I don't want to mess with that. And that happens a lot. Even with experienced players, they'll look at like a Heat Lance and they're like, oh my god, that's terrifying. And I'm like, nah, dog, this ain't going to do anything. Trust me. And that's exactly like how it goes a lot of times. It's like, I'll roll some dice and I'm just like, oh, yep, there it is. You know, and it's one of those, like, I've told people that type of stuff before, you know, like, they're like, oh, that's real scary. And I'm like, nope, here's how this is going to work. I'm going to get like 1 good turn out of it. The rest of the game, it's not going to do anything. And you're going to overreact to it because it looks scary. And then that's going to be it. And it does happen quite a bit, you know. So, but overall, that's the list. Like I said, my first game should be next week. Maybe this weekend. I've got to get with him. It is into Votan. Once he gets the list submitted, I'll be able to kind of look at it. Let me see what the mission was. I don't even remember. Mission K, which means I also need to add it to my tabletop battles. Plus 40k, game description, league, round 1, Boop, 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 boop. What is Mission K? Well, Chris. Or not. Kyle. Mission K. Scorched Earth, Stalwarts, and Search and Destroy. I don't know what Stalwarts is off the top of my head. Oh. I see. There's like a whole video briefing you can take. That's kind of neat. Sorry. That's actually kind of cool. Battle. Oh, go back. Stalwarts, I think, is battle line can advance in action. That's what I'm looking for. Battle line units can still shoot after performing an action and can perform actions in engagement range. There we go. So that's what Stalwarts is. So that's interesting. You know, so that's our first mission. So I do have a lot of battle lines, so hopefully that kind of benefits me. Again, I don't know what his list is going to be. Knowing Kyle, it's probably going to be as many tanks as he can bring. That's just kind of how he plays. Which means, you know, that's not terrible, because that means my Talos are going to have a field day, right? Like, I'm going to be able to just, like, dump a bunch of haywire into something and make it go away. I think one of the guys in our league, we have a league Discord, and one of the fellas in the league was just like, man, Chris looked like he's tired of vehicles and tired of all these parking lot lists, and it wasn't intentional. It just kind of like is what it is. So, but that's the list. Mission K, I will do a recap after I get the game in. I'm going to be streaming again in probably 10 to 15 minutes. We're going to be doing my firefight tournament list preview. I've been trying to get that going here. So we're going to get that going in the next 10 to 15 minutes. If you hopped on and, you know, enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button. I appreciate you hopping in here. You all have a great day. And if you're here for the firefight stream, I will see you then.